On a cold June night in 1962, three men stared out at the dark waters surrounding Alcatraz Island. Ahead of them lay nearly 2 miles of freezing ocean, powerful currents, and almost certain death. Behind them stood the most secure prison in America. No prisoner had ever successfully escaped from Alcatraz, and yet by sunrise, 3 inmates would be gone, not transferred, not captured, gone. More than 60 years later, nobody can say with certainty what happened to them. Did they drown in the icy waters of San Francisco Bay? Or did they pull off the most legendary prison break in American history? This is the story of the Alcatraz escape that was never solved. For decades, Alcatraz carried a reputation unlike any other prison in the United States. Built on a rocky island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, it was designed to hold the nation's most dangerous and troublesome criminals. The prison housed notorious inmates, including gangsters, bank robbers, and men who had repeatedly escaped from other prisons. The island itself was part of the security system. Even if someone managed to get beyond the walls, they would still face freezing water, unpredictable currents, and a long swim to shore. Officials believed escape was impossible. Many prisoners believed it too, but 3 inmates saw things differently. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Frank Morris was considered exceptionally intelligent. Orphaned at a young age, he spent much of his life in institutions and prisons. His IQ reportedly ranked far above average, and prison officials knew he was clever. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, came from a farming family in Florida. They had experience working around water and were known for their practical skills. Together, the 3 men began planning something that seemed impossible. Their opportunity came from a hidden weakness inside Alcatraz itself. Behind the prisoners' cells ran a narrow utility corridor. The walls separating the cells from this corridor had been weakened over time by moisture and corrosion. Most inmates never noticed, but Frank Morris did. Night after night, the men secretly chipped away at the concrete around the air vents in their cells. They used homemade tools crafted from stolen spoons, scraps of metal, and a makeshift drill created from a vacuum cleaner motor. The work had to be done quietly. Guards walked the cell blocks regularly. Any unusual sound could expose the entire operation. To hide the noise, the inmates often worked during the prison's music hour, when instruments and singing echoed through the building. Slowly, the holes grew larger. Eventually, they became large enough for a man to squeeze through. Beyond the openings lay the utility corridor, and beyond that, a path toward freedom. The escape plan became more ambitious. The men knew getting off the island was only half the challenge. Surviving the water would be even harder, so they began collecting raincoats. Not 1 or 2, more than 50. Using prison-issued raincoats, they carefully stitched together a homemade inflatable raft and life vests. Every seam was sealed by heat from steam pipes. It was an extraordinary piece of engineering, built entirely in secret inside one of America's most secure prisons. But perhaps the most famous part of the plan involved something far stranger. The men created dummy heads. Using soap, toilet paper, concrete dust, and paint, they crafted realistic human faces. They even collected real hair from the prison barber shop. When placed on their pillows at night, the fake heads looked enough like sleeping inmates to fool guards during routine checks. Everything was ready. The date was June 11, 1962. As darkness settled over Alcatraz, the 3 men prepared for the most dangerous night of their lives. A 4th inmate, Alan West, had helped plan the escape. But when the time came, he couldn't get through the opening in his cell. He desperately worked to widen the hole. The others waited. Minutes passed, then more. Eventually, Morris and the Anglin brothers made a decision. They would leave without him. West watched helplessly as his partners disappeared into the darkness. The 3 men climbed through their openings and entered the utility corridor. From there, they ascended through pipes and maintenance areas until they reached the roof of the prison. The journey was risky. One wrong step could trigger alarms or alert guards, but somehow they made it. Crossing the rooftop under the cover of night, they climbed down a ventilation shaft and reached the shoreline. There they inflated their homemade raft. Then they pushed off into the black waters of San Francisco Bay and vanished. The following morning, prison guards began their routine inspections. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Prisoners seemed to be asleep in their beds. Then one guard noticed something strange. A head rolled off a pillow and crashed onto the floor. The truth became instantly clear. An escape had happened. A massive search operation began almost immediately. The FBI, Coast Guard, military personnel, and local law enforcement launched one of the largest manhunts in the prison's history. Helicopters searched from above. Boats combed the bay. Investigators looked for any sign of the fugitives. What they found only deepened the mystery. Pieces of the raft were discovered floating in the water. A life vest was recovered. A waterproof packet containing personal photographs belonging to the Anglin brothers was found nearby. To many investigators, these items suggested a tragic ending. The water temperature that night was around 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia could develop quickly. Strong currents could drag swimmers far from shore. Officials concluded that the men most likely drowned. But there was a problem. No bodies were ever found. Not one. And as the years passed, evidence emerged that raised even more questions. The Anglin family claimed they received mysterious signs suggesting the brothers were still alive. Family members reported receiving Christmas cards signed by John and Clarence for several years after the escape. Some relatives even claimed the brothers secretly attended their mother's funeral, disguised as women. None of these stories could be fully verified, but they refused to disappear. Then came an even more surprising development. In 2013, authorities revealed that they had received a letter supposedly written by one of the escapees. The letter claimed to be from John Anglin. According to its contents, all three men had survived the escape. It stated that Frank Morris had died years earlier and that Clarence had also passed away. The writer claimed he was elderly, sick, and willing to surrender in exchange for medical treatment. Investigators analyzed the letter but could not definitively prove whether it was authentic. The mystery continued. Even modern science has struggled to provide a final answer. Computer simulations conducted years later suggested that survival may have been possible under certain conditions. If the men launched their raft at exactly the right time and followed favorable currents, they could have reached land. Not easily, not safely, but possibly. That single word, possibly, has kept the case alive for generations. In 1963, less than a year after the escape, Alcatraz prison closed. Officially, the shutdown was due to high operating costs and deteriorating infrastructure. Yet the prison's most famous chapter had already been written. The escape became part of American legend. Books were written. Documentaries were produced. Movies brought the story to millions of viewers. But despite decades of investigation, the central question remains unanswered. What happened to Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin after they disappeared into the darkness? Did the freezing waters claim their lives before they reached shore? Or did three determined inmates outsmart one of the most secure prisons ever built and quietly begin new lives somewhere beyond the horizon? Some mysteries fade with time. This one only grows deeper. Because on that June night in 1962, three men entered the darkness. And whether they died in the bay or escaped into history, the truth may have disappeared with them forever.